What up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to episode 61 of the Spun Today podcast. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz. Thank you very much for listening. In this episode, I speak about watching a bunch of stuff. No wonder why I don't get as much writing as I want done. Bert Kreischer's stand-up comedy special, The Machine, which aired on Showtime. Michael Che's stand-up comedy special, Michael Che Matters, which aired on Netflix. Donald Glover's new TV show on FX, Atlanta or ATL, one of the two. I think Atlanta. This season of Tough stands for TUF, The Ultimate Fighter. Reading The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And finally, listening to the Story Grid podcast. So if any of those things are of interest to you, please stick around and listen to the podcast. That's why I record these things. I record so you can listen, and in doing so, share some cool shit with you guys, and hopefully useful things with you guys. Alrighty, so a couple comedy specials that I saw since the last recording, which were Bert Kreischer's special, which was hilarious, aired on Showtime, and I recommend you guys check that out if you can. Bert Kreischer, I'm always gonna I try to be objective, or I think I'm being objective anyway, but I mean, everybody has their biases, right? Bert Kreischer comes out of the Rogan camp, and I always root for those guys from that camp, because since I got into podcasting and stuff like that, a lot of guys like Duncan Trussell, Joey Diaz, Ari Shaffir, Bert Kreischer, and a slew of others I got to know because of the Joe Rogan podcast, and I got to know before they became as popular as they've become. And if you don't know about them, maybe you're not that deep into it, but they've gained a lot of popularity just by being affiliated with Rogan and his podcast. Being that Rogan's podcast gets I think it's 12 to 15 million downloads a month or something like that now, and it's some next level shit if you get on there. It literally changes people's lives, as some return guests have said, and shoots them off into a different direction in their careers, and they get to highlight certain issues, and they see the direct impact of being on the show. So comics like these that Joe took under his wing, taking on the road with them to work as opening acts for him when he does his comedy and stuff like that, and have then gone on to, some of them start their own podcasts and become popular within their own right. The Tom Segura's, Christina Pazsitzky, Amy Schumer too, before she blew up. Anyway, so I always have a slight bias towards all these dudes, because it's kind of like that I knew he was cool before everybody else knew he was cool type of thing. So take whatever I say with a grain of salt, but I think they're all of them are hilarious, and Bert's no exception. He has his podcast, the Bertcast, which you guys should check out. He does some pretty cool and open interviews, and one of which actually is, I think it was featured in this past week's Midday Monday Boost letter, which was his 200th episode, and it was with Tom Segura and Bill Burr, them three just shooting this shit, and it was a dope episode. They got into a lot of different topics and stuff like that, and you would have known about it had you been signed up to my weekly newsletter, the Midday Monday Boost letter, found at spuntoday.com/subscribe. Anyway, interesting story about Bert. He is they wrote a Rolling Stone, I think it was Rolling Stone, pretty sure, pretty positive it was a Rolling Stone article about him when he was in college, about being the biggest party dude on campus or something like that in Florida State University, and he was in college for like 6 or 7 years. And that article became the inspiration, or like what spawned National Lampoon's Van Wilder movie, which was a really popular movie. If you guys hadn't seen it, my wife hadn't seen it. We actually rewatched it the other day. It's hilarious. So check it out. And anyway, that movie was based on, Bert. And or loosely based, it's not like a comic or anything like that, but just like the whole party animal, fucking life of the party, in college forever type of story. He's a family guy. He has 2 little girls. He's married, so a lot of his comedy has to do, like with a lot of comedians, it's like what they're around, you know what I mean? Which is, I think, something I'm like drawn to with comedy, is that there's like, it's rooted in realism. Obviously, things are exaggerated for comedic effect and stuff like that, but it's rooted in realism. Kind of like, certain hip hop artists and I guess, a lot of musicians, like you draw from your surroundings, from write what you know. A lot of writers and stuff that I'm drawn to also write what you know. And it's like that type of realism, I think, that people are drawn to. So it's a lot of that, like family oriented, raising children type of thing in it, which is funny. As well as his iconic machine story, which again was a tip from Rogan. A story that Bert told on the podcast, that Rogan told him that he has to turn that shit into a bit because it was a crazy story, which I'll actually link to in the episode notes. When he originally told the story on Rogan's podcast, somebody took the story. It's like probably like a 10-minute story, and like animated it. They created some like South Park looking animation to it, and it goes perfectly. I'm gonna try to find that and link to it in the episode notes so you guys can check it out. Anyway, that became his like biggest closing bit ever. People like yell it out at all his shows, like, say the machine story, say the machine story. And, everybody's heard it a bunch of times and still wants to hear it again. And that's on the special. What else? Another story of his, which is not without controversy, is Tracy Morgan's story that he has told on stage, or that he tells on stage. That's also, you can find like clips of that online as well. That's a story that, as of late, the latest quote unquote like update about that is, it's a story that was also told by the same story, which was also told by Jay Moore, like the comic actor guy, and then a few other comics as well. It turns out were like saying the same story. And one night, this is according to Bert, so everybody, again, take it with a grain of salt. But it's like this elaborate story of a time that he was at a comedy club and wound up hanging out with Tracy Morgan, and they all go out because Bert was hanging out with a few other comics that were hanging out with Tracy, and he got thrown into the mix, but he was like a starting out comic, like he was like in the first few years of comedy. It's like this whole elaborate story, right? But it's funny as shit. And supposedly, like, Jay Moore approached him about it, and he told, like, Bert gave him permission, yeah, you could tell that story or whatever. And then people started thinking it was Jay Moore's story and that Bert was like stealing from him, and like vice versa. And what else? Like, one of the other comics that were there that night, Tony Woods, recently like yelled out when Bert was on stage somewhere. I think in Atlanta actually, and he was like, "Tell the Tracy Morgan story," and he was like, "Who's that out there or whatever?" And he called him on stage, and Bert was like, "You know what? I'm gonna tell the story as I remember it, and you tell your version of the story," because he was there also. And the way it went, according to Bert, was that most of the details, the way that Bert remembered it, Tony was like, it didn't happen like that, it happened like this. So he had like his version of the same story, but they had the same story. And both, confirmed that the other was there, etc. The only thing that was the same about their stories is the fact that the way it ended, which I'm not gonna give that away. I want you guys to check it out and listen to it, because regardless of what it is, a funny story in and of itself. Then Tony Woods called Bert like after the fact, and because he heard another comic, he heard Jay Moore telling the story, and he was like, I feel like I'm like the TMZ of comedians now. He was asking Bert like, yo, why is Jay Moore telling our story? Like, that's our story. He wasn't even there, blah blah blah. And it's like this whole like back and forth, and supposedly the story's been told also like in Australia by comics out there and in Europe, and 'cause it's like a really funny story, but people like tell it firsthand, because I guess that's like the effect of it. And it became a bit that was like quote unquote okay to steal, and I don't know, it's become some sort of controversy, but originally it's supposed to be a Bert Kreischer story. So take that for what it is. Either way, like I said, it's funny. I'm gonna link to it in the episode notes so you guys can check that out as well. All right. So yeah, check that out. Bert Kreischer's The Machine special on Showtime. Next, Michael Che Matters comedy special. Michael Che, my brother told me about this one, and it's on Netflix. It's currently streaming on Netflix, so you guys can check it out. As of today, what's today? November 30th, 2016. And it was really funny. I didn't know of Michael Che when my brother told me about him. And like I saw it, I kind of recognize him from a couple clips that I've seen like on YouTube online that are SNL clips. He was a writer for SNL, and then became the I forget what it's called, that like news daily update, I think it is, daily news, no, it's a newspaper, daily, I don't know, weekend update, like that, like news coverage special segment or something like that SNL does. He became the co-anchor for that after being a writer on SNL, which is pretty cool. And he has his comedy special. I like his I don't know, like his swag, I guess, on stage. Swag. Can I be more fucking vague? His demeanor, he's funny. Did awesome crowd work. What I appreciate the most out of him and like this style of comedy is there's a substance behind it. Not that there's not, like, for example, like comparing it to like Bert Kreischer, the specials that I was just talking about. It's like funny as fuck, like stories in and of it themselves. Shit that just makes you laugh and you have a good time. Something like Michael Che's comedy is more like social commentary type of funny, which I like a lot, and it's more, I guess, like thought provoking in certain ways, and makes you think about shit more, which I like. And it's like the why South Park to me is like so awesome and iconic, because it's like hilarious and it's like just straight facts, but like in comedic form. It's like straight, think about this, chew on this. So it's the best social commentary we have around right now. And I realized, like, with my own like writing, not the like free writing and stuff like that. It's more like it's like pseudo philosophy type shit. But with like the short stories, I feel like I tend to like write within that vein, or at least like want to. You know what I mean? Like that's the angle that I've been taking, because like when I've been writing stories, it's kind of like, oh, this seems like a cool story, let me tell it. The way I'm like thinking of it in my head. But I've asked myself, like, what the fuck is this? Like, what's the point of the story? And then like I see, it's like moral type, think about this stories, you know what I mean? And I appreciate like that type of comedy in its own right, and when it's funny, it makes it more digestible, and I definitely recommend it. He's a younger comic than like a Bert Kreischer. He is a 7-year comic, if I'm not mistaken. And here's an interesting quote from Jerry Seinfeld from Jerry Seinfeld, according to Godfrey, that I heard in a podcast recently, the About Last Night podcast with Adam Ray and Brad Williams. Godfrey was saying that some advice that Seinfeld gave him a while back was that your comedic years is you could like draw a parallel to years of age. So, for example, he was telling Godfrey, because a lot of comics, as a quick aside, like a lot of comics say, or like the consensus seems to be like around the 10-year mark. That's when you're like, you get it. You know what I mean? That's when paying your dues, putting in work for 10 years. That's when things start clicking together. And if you're talented, it could happen a little sooner. If you're not, it might never happen. But that's around the time where you are like considered, okay, you are a comic. You actually stuck to this shit for a decade. And Seinfeld told Godfrey once that the years that you've been in comedy, think about that as years as like a human being. And it kind of made sense. He was like, you've been doing comedy at that point. Like Godfrey's like a 20-year comic or some shit like that. And he was like, if you're think of yourself as a 20-year-old, like what do you know, like when you're 20 versus when you're 10. If you're a 10-year comic, you're like 10 years old, or a 15-year-old. And I don't know, it kind of sort of made sense, at least the way like Godfrey like described it. And from the way that I've heard like other comics like describe that like 10-year mark. So keeping something like that in mind, when considering the fact that Michael Che is a 7-year comic, similar to like Pete Davidson that I mentioned in a previous episode. Like these are like talented dudes that they're this funny this early in their careers. And it was pretty dope. I recommend it for you guys to check it out. I saw in Michael Che, and every comic says this, and it's true of, I think, probably like artists and all like types of like genres, that you try to emulate your people that you look up to. Like, let's say me with writing, like my first book, which is available for you guys to check out if you want to, Make Way for You, Tips for Getting Out of Your Own Way. Go to spuntoday.com/books. It's literally modeled after the War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, which is my favorite book. And you emulate people that you admire. I think like when you start off, before you like find your own voice and like stuff like that. Not that Michael Che doesn't have his own voice, because he clearly does, but I saw certain quirks in him that I recognized in other comics, like Hannibal Buress. Certain of like his inflections, and Hannibal is also a comic. He's roughly, I think he's around like that 7, 8, 9 year mark in comedy. And he was also an SNL writer. I'm not sure if he still is, but I guess they like work together. And he's a comic that's gotten like a lot of popularity as of late. And I saw certain like inflections that I noticed from Hannibal in Michael Che. So maybe that's an influence on him. I definitely saw some Bill Burr, and Bill Burr's like a comic. He's like everybody could, when having the conversation of the top comics working today, Bill Burr's always undoubtedly in that conversation. So that's like a clear, like, everybody's influenced by that guy. But stuff like that is like kind of cool to see. Could you see like the development of an artist, whether it's a comic or whatever else. And I think that's pretty cool. So anyway, check it out. It's currently streaming on Netflix. It's called Michael Che Matters, and I think you guys will enjoy it. All right, let me try to speed this up a little bit. So, with a couple more things. Atlanta, a TV show that my brother, again, told me about, and I checked it out, and it was awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. It's Donald Glover's show. Donald Glover's a talented fucking dude. He wrote and created the show. He's also like a rapper who's put out a couple albums, and he's done a stand-up comedy as well. He has, as far as I know, one special, which was really funny. I remember watching it back when my wife lived in Massachusetts. I think we saw it over there. We like bumped into it on Comedy Central, left it on, and got like hooked on it. Caught it like in the first few minutes in the beginning, and just like watched it through, and had a really good time. We were like, "What the hell is this guy? He's fucking funny." And it was Donald Glover. And we got to rewatch that special. Now that I'm like more, I guess, like into comedy and stuff like that, and see them more regularly, I want to see what I think of it now. But yeah, the show is dope. I saw an interview of one of the main characters on The Breakfast Club. I forget his name, but he described how in creating the show, Michael Glover's attempt was to show this side of like a more realistic side of show business, not just the glitz and the glamour and like the Entourage style like story. You know, somebody who's broke that makes it and you know, is popular and has millions of dollars and stuff like that. But this story, which is untold or not as like popular, I guess, with you know feel good Hollywood movies and TV shows and stuff like that. That is, you know, someone who does make it, kind of not make it, but who, well, yeah, make it. I mean, if I had that level of success, that fucking one person that I didn't personally know recognize like my writing or something like that, that would be awesome for me. That would be making it for me. You know what I mean? So the show depicts the story of in Atlanta, a local Atlanta rapper who has like one or two hits on the radio, but you know, he still lives in the hood. He's still, you know, he's not fucking a millionaire by any stretch, but he's living off what he wants to do, and you know, still kind of sort of struggling. You know, he doesn't have a mansion, lives in I don't know, like a small house or apartment, and still like sells drugs on the side, and some people recognize him, some people don't. They recognize the song because it's catchy, the Paperboy song, and it's like that. It shows like that level or that layer of success, that level of success within like that realm, and I'm sure there's like hundreds of stories like that of people like, you know, get signed to deals and then, you know, one hit wonders or you know, movie deals or like option scripts and like, you know, like small success stories like that. And it's cool to see things at that level, and it feels more, again, going back to that realism that we're drawn to. It feels more like real, more rugged, more like less fluff and less bullshit. And it's just written well. The acting, the casting was great. The acting, it's funny, it's engaging, and I really like Donald Glover's character, his character arc. Like, we see him in the beginning go from like this mooching kind of, not low life, but just a dude that doesn't have his life together. Somewhere along the line, lost his way. You're not sure why. He's like, his parents kind of like shun him in, you get the sense of his parents like cut him off, like, yo, go make a life for yourself. You can't fucking mooch off of us anymore. Like, you're a grown ass man. You gotta like make your own way. And like his cousin, which is the rapper that's semi successful, makes it. His cousin has like the same type of attitude towards him. Like, I don't really trust you. You're into like these, I don't know, get rich quick schemes, or like something's off with you. And he has a ex-girlfriend / baby mama that he like mooches off of also, that she's like, you can't stay here unless you pay rent. And some days he pays rent, some days he does, and he kind of just like seems like he's just like aimlessly like flowing through life and like trying to mooch off of people. So he starts off like that, and then at the end, spoiler alert, fast forward a few seconds if you guys don't want to hear it, but to make the point of like his character arc goes from that to, at least what I got from it, to someone who's like, you know what, I can make it. So he kind of gets like the self confidence of, you know what, I can make it on my own. And now that I'm sort of kind of getting my life together, and I'm working at something, and it seems to be gelling, it seems to be working in, managing, helping to manage his cousin's career. Things seem to be falling into place. I'm making a little bit of money, but I'm being responsible with it. I'm gonna grind, and I'm gonna pay my dues, and be where I know I'm supposed to be. He kind of has that attitude at the end, where he gets a little money. He doesn't blow it or something like that, and he does get offers to like stay in his wife's house now, and he gives her money for rent and stuff like that. But he chooses the hard route. He chooses the self-defining route, the route that he's been on, that started working. He's not gonna like abandon that for, oh, you know what, I made this, oh yeah, hell yeah, let me reap the rewards now and sleep in the bed and all is good now, I made it, kind of thing. Like within that world, like within that, he was like searching for just somebody to mooch off of and stay with his wife and not pay rent and stuff like that, or his ex-girl, whatever. And he could have that now, but he like came to the realization of, nah, you know what, that's not what I want, and let me continue on this path of earning it the way I have been, and see where it leads. And it kind of ends like that, and that in itself made me look forward to, aside from the fact that it's a good show, I enjoyed watching it, was funny, that in itself made me want to watch next season, to see where his character goes from there. So kudos to those guys. All right, this season of Tough, quickly. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in the past, but this season, I haven't watched The Ultimate Fighter in a few seasons, a lot of seasons, because it kind of went stale. Kind of, for those of you that don't know, The Ultimate Fighter is the UFC's reality TV show. It's pretty much what put UFC on the map. Like they were, hemorrhaging millions of dollars when the Fertittas initially bought the company, and they had this idea of this reality TV show. It was kind of like their Hail Mary attempt, and after this, if it didn't go well, they were, it's literally like a losing investment, and they were probably going to sell the company or something like that. There was rumors of that. There are also counter rumors like, no matter how much money this thing loses, we're never going to sell it because we love this shit, type of thing, that the type of attitude that the Fertittas and Dana White had. But it was definitely losing money. So after the first season of Tough, The Ultimate Fighter, it was like an iconic final match type of thing that completely flipped the business around, and it went from that to being sold for $4.5 billion and becoming the fastest growing sport in history. Somewhere within that, the show went stale. So it's a show of, you get like a real world type of scenario. Real world, the TV show, not real world as in the real world. But you get a bunch of fighters that want to be in the UFC. You throw them in a house together, you let them mix, and you're gonna have like the testosterone and the fighting and the bullshit and stuff like that. But the guys that are in there, like 15, 16 guys or something like that, they get split up into 2 teams, and they get a coach each. The coach is a current UFC fighter, and pretty much the 2 teams fight each other, and as you lose, you get kicked off of the show. Not of the show, but you can stay on the show and help train and stuff like that for your teammates that are still in it. But pretty much it's like a last man standing type of thing. Gets a 6-figure contract with the UFC and wins the Ultimate Fighter. So it's been stale for a long time. This season it caught my attention, and I've been watching it. I've seen every episode so far, and it's a really good season. I like that in this season they got champions from a lot of other MMA organizations, and within this specific weight class of Demetrius Johnson, I think it's a 125 pound division or 135 pound division. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson is arguably one of the best fighters of all time. He's like on a sick winning streak. I think maybe the most wins like in a row or title defenses, or he's tied for it, and he's gone through like the entire division like 2 or 3 times. Like there's nobody like fucking with him at all. So they had this idea of, if for this season of Tough, we're gonna do a 125 pounder because everybody is in with the same like weight division. But instead of just like random guys that are gonna come audition for it or whatever, because they have like a selection process where they have these guys like work out and stuff like that, and they pick the top 16 or whatever. They targeted champions of other MMA divisions, because UFC is not the only game in town. It's the only game in town, but there's like, I don't know, hundreds of other sanctioned organizations that have their own champions and stuff like that. How like Bellator is probably the only one that anybody else has ever heard of. There's dozens and dozens or hundreds of other ones, and probably not hundreds, definitely dozens though. And there's, all leagues have their own champions, you know what I mean? Think like WWF and WCW, like even though that's fake bullshit, but I used to love that shit when I was a kid though. So all these champions were targeted and brought into the house, and it's brought like this level of instead of you got like these guys that like all not suck because they're all fighters, they're all the last one gets a UFC contract. Like Uriah Hall was one of these guys. I don't even think he won that season. I think Gastelum won that season, but he's in the UFC also, currently in the UFC. But they kind of like entered the UFC as freshmen from that point, you know what I mean? But these guys are all like elite champions within their own right. Albeit in organizations that can't fuck with the UFC, like with the level of the UFC, but they're kind of like a notch up from what the talent that you're used to seeing, you know what I mean? And it's been a really, really good season. Episode 11 particularly, there was a fight between Shelton and Tim Elliott. This is the fight of the season, easily by far. Such a dope fight, so check that out. And I think the finale is actually today, because this Saturday, December 3rd, Demetrius Johnson is supposed to fight whoever won, and it's probably out there. I don't want to know. Nobody tell me who won. because I'm definitely looking forward to that. You know how sick it would be, like of an upset if Demetrius Johnson loses? That would be nuts. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. And you guys should check it out if you haven't, if you're into it. To be honest, I'm not even sure like what time or when it airs and stuff like that. I just find like all the episodes on YouTube and like watch them on like my lunch break and shit like that at work. Or like on a slow day or something like that. But yeah, check it out. All right, last two things. The Alchemist. It's sure you guys have heard of it. It's like a best-selling book by Paulo Coelho. I had heard about it in the past. Sorry about that. I had to pause real quick. So yeah, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's a best-selling novel, and it's one that I've always heard of and had on my to-read list. I finally did, and it's I listened to the audiobook, right? And it's one of, I think, the first audiobook that I've ever wanted to like re-listen to again. I actually started re-listening to like something like about Audible is that it allows you to save clips and take notes. Like, for example, I could be listening to it and be like, damn, that was a dope line. Let me rewind it, 10 seconds. And I click on clip, and then it saves like the clip up until like wherever I want, right? And then I save that, and then it allows you to like write a note. So I might write, this was a dope, comment on life or like whatever, or something that I liked that resonated with me about the quote. So then at the end or in the middle, like whenever, you could look at like the clips section within Audible, and it'll have like the clip there with your note, and you click play and you listen to like that exact same segment, which is pretty dope. So I started re-listening to like all those like little clips and stuff like that. And to me, and I'm sure this is might not be like an original interpretation of it, and people listening might be like, what, I didn't get that. But you know what, that's the beauty of subjective reading and stuff like that. You get what you get out of it, I get what I get out of it. Now, what I've got out of it so far is a twofold thing. One, I know that there's so much more that I have to like gain from it, which is why like I feel inclined to like listen again. And I'm going to, and not just from like the main character, which is like the boy going through the little shepherd boy going through like his life, but his like all the other characters within the story, from the alchemist to the king to etc. etc. And to me, it's at first listen about going through life, pursuing your dreams, and the boy meeting people along his journey of pursuing his dream, literally, like a dream he had of, spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't read it, the dream he had of a treasure that was around the pyramids, buried around the pyramids. And he was literally, through his life, following that dream and the advice of a gypsy fortune teller lady that told him to go to where the pyramids are and find the treasure, etc., and taking advice from different people along the way. It's kind of the, following your dreams at all costs type of thing. And then along the way, he met people that had certain dreams and decided to not pursue them. And then you get like their perspectives, which are like wise in their own right. And then his wise yet naive perspective of, wrestling with continuing to pursue his dream no matter what, even when he feels like his dream changed and he like falls in love and like stuff like that, or taking the wise advice of these other people that he's met along the way and making a life for himself wherever he's at, etc. It's definitely a dope read, and I recommend it. And that's all I really have to say about that. I'm definitely gonna re-listen, and there will be more. But yeah, on first listen, definitely a 5-star rating level book in my opinion. So check it out. And finally, the last thing I want to mention is the Story Grid podcast. Now, the Story Grid podcast is, and I'm going to read here from the Story Grid website. Join Sean Coyne, author of the Story Grid and top editor for 25 plus years. Quick aside, Sean Coyne is the editor for Stephen Pressfield that I mentioned earlier with the War of Art, etc. And yeah, that's it. That's the quick aside. So yeah, join Sean Coyne, author of the Story Grid and a top editor for 25 plus years, and Tim Grahl, struggling writer, as they discuss the ins and outs of what makes a story great. Now, this is so awesome that, and this is why I love the Joanna Penn, the Creative Penn podcast by Joanna Penn, because she put me onto this podcast, and it's been like invaluable so far. It's transformed it gave me more tools to like work with, because, for example, like all writers, not all, but most, if not all, successful writers that like of, like the J.K. Rowlings and Stephen Kings and the names that they work with editors. Indie writers work with editors as well at all levels. And to me, it was always kind of like I felt like I wouldn't feel like the story was mine if I was working with an editor. Because and an editor is not just somebody that goes like line by line and says, you misspelled this word. They get into like structure and conventions of stories that need to be within a story in order for it to be considered like even in that genre. Like, it's not just like spewed out words. Like, there's a scientific structure to this shit. And they, help keep certain things in line. Like, you mentioned that character A had a red shirt in chapter 1, but in chapter 3, when the other character flashes back to the scene, she's wearing a blue shirt. So, you that's inconsistent there. Like, to keep that type of consistency throughout it. And there's like different levels to editing, right? If you are a wannabe writer such as myself, you can afford a real editor. It could cost for like a manuscript like $2 or $3 grand or something like that for like a budget editor. And something like this, like a podcast like this, where you have a guy, Tim Grahl, who is a self-proclaimed struggling writer, who is literally writing a story and having Sean Coyne edit it for him. Sean Coyne, which has almost 3 decades worth of editing experience, is the editor for one of my favorite authors, Stephen Pressfield. Just like getting his insight into what editing is and how he looks at the story that Tim Grahl is putting together is invaluable. Like, I've gotten so many gems from listening to this podcast that I like highly recommend it to any writer out there, or anybody who's just like interested like in the craft of writing, just like get into his head and see how he thinks. And then you could borrow like those tools, and they have like literal tools like mapping, like story mapping guides and certain conventions that stories need. And it's like so much deeper than, which just fascinates the shit out of me. It's so much deeper than what I didn't even initially know. Like things like the 3-act structure, like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, that stories should be in, or most stories are told in, whether you realize it or not. And he explains how if it's like a romance story, like there's certain conventions that the story must have that the readers of romance stories are looking for. Or like with a thriller, you have to have like the hero's journey, plot followed by like the all is lost moment, where the hero is like furthest from his goal, followed by the escalating incidents that lead to the climax of, he's confronted with the villain of the story, for example. And like certain like conventions that have to be there to fit within a genre And then within those conventions, that's where you like get to play around with like different styles and ideas and like stuff like that. But the stories work because they are rooted in those like pillars of writing. And then he gets into stuff like, which has been really helpful with the story that started off as a short story that I promised you guys like fucking months ago, that I can now say is definitely going to be a novella. With where I'm at with it, and with like these editing tools I've been working with that I've picked up from the podcast and stuff like that. Hopefully I just don't like, fuck up the whole story, but it completely morphed into something else, and I'm not even gonna like promise it to you guys anytime soon. But yeah, I'm definitely still working on it. He gets into like the flow of one scene to the other. Like scenes should, and for it to flow properly, to keep the reader engaged and not bored, you don't want it to be like too, like each scene, he says, should be like going from a plus to a minus, like a positive thing to a negative thing. And then if not each scene like back to back, but then if it's if let's say scene 1 is a positive to a negative, scene 2 has to be a negative to a positive scene for it to flow properly. Scene 3 would then have to be a positive to a negative. Scene 4 would have to be a negative to a positive. So it goes plus minus plus minus plus plus minus minus plus plus minus minus plus like that. And there's certain tweaks you could do to the beginning and the end of, let's say, if you have a scene that you've already written, like I had. There are like little different angles you can take to get across the same point of the scene, and the scene have the same function to be able to meet that requirement of like the plus minus flow, and tell the story the way you want to tell it, but in a way that flows and keeps the reader engaged. And it's been awesome. I'm going to link to the site where you'll find like a bunch of these like PDF tools that I mentioned, and definitely listen to the podcast. Because just my little blurb about it is definitely not gonna do it justice from what you can get from it. And just like think about listening to anyone that's been doing anything for 3 decades. Like they're gonna have something to say about it, some insight that you, at least, even if you have the same amount of time like doing what you do, you get somebody else's perspective on it that's been doing it just as long. And definitely in my situation where I can't afford an editor, I am going to be like self-editing in this way, and probably even after the fact when I can't afford an editor in the future, would still be approaching stories in this way, just to have that much higher of a quality of output before going to an editor, and then which will just add to that. Anyway, the Story Grid podcast, highly recommend. And that is the episode, folks. Stick around if you want to listen for a couple more minutes on how you can help support the podcast. And if not, then I'll check you guys out next time. And I will record the outro to this when I get back from my 9 to 5. Peace. All right, folks, I'm back. So, ways that you can support the podcast. Let's check it out. First and foremost, you can rate and review the podcast on wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, and that would be greatly appreciated. If you check out actually spuntoday.com/podcast and you're not sure, which would be weird, right? If you're not sure where you listen to this podcast, or not to find it. Well, maybe you stumbled upon it like on YouTube or something like that, and you're not familiar with the whole podcast world, but you can't get enough of me. Then go to spuntoday.com/podcast, and there on that website you could actually listen to every episode of the Spun Today podcast. But I updated it with these little links to different podcast apps that you can download on your phone, and you can access each and every one of these episodes the same exact way, either on iTunes, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, Overcast, Player FM, Google Play, YouTube, Tumblr, and Podbay. Or wherever else you enjoy listening to podcasts. And rate and review the podcast wherever it is that you do listen to. I would greatly appreciate that. Next, you can support the podcast by getting something that's pretty cool. At least to me, it's pretty cool. I would definitely sign up for it if I were you. And I enjoy putting them together and sending them out. It's my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter called the Midday Monday Boost Letter. And what it is 5 things that I send out every Monday at noon, kind of jumpstart your week. And you will get 5 different recommendations from me. One is a podcast of the week, which is not necessarily a new podcast that came out that particular week. Just to clarify, it's a podcast. I listen to 3 to 10 podcasts a day, depending on the length, every day. And I have like an ongoing list on, this was a dope episode that I got X from, and I want to share this. So it could be, a podcast that aired a few weeks ago or a month ago, or that I just heard that particular week and decided to share with you guys. So you'll get a podcast of the week recommendation, a word of the week, a quote of the week, a video of the week, which works the same way. It's not necessarily the newest hit video on YouTube or some shit like that, but it could be like a TED talk that I found insightful, battle rap that I thought was dope, or interviews and stuff like that. And also a photo of the week, a dope photo that I stumbled upon on the net, or usually on Instagram, from some photographers that I follow, whose work I enjoy and I want to share with you guys as well. So it's those 5 things. If you want to check it out, it's 100% free, and you can subscribe just by dropping your email address in at spuntoday.com/subscribe. Another way to support the podcast is to share some insight of what it is that you do, whether you're into writing yourself, or if you're into painting or anything creative. Check out my 5-question questionnaire, which is located at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. The point of this is, if your responses to these 5 questions could potentially spark inspiration in someone else, why not share that? So it's things like relating to your craft. Do you remember the first thing that you ever created? What inspires you to write when you don't feel like actually writing or creating? Stuff like that. So tips and tricks that we can share, tools that we can share with each other, would make this whole collective experience that much better, in my opinion. So check that out, spuntoday.com/questionnaire. Check out photos on my website. I like taking pictures of stuff, and you can check them out. Maybe you'll enjoy them yourself at spuntoday.com/photography. You can download any of them for free. And check out my Instagram at spuntoday, my Twitter at spuntoday, and facebook.com/spuntoday. You can find photography, all throughout all those things. The Instagram and the Facebook page are less geared towards, like quote unquote photography. Although I do post all the photos from the photography section of my website on, Instagram and Facebook as well. But Instagram is also other shit, and as well as Facebook. But if you want just photography, which is usually like landscape type stuff and things that I like to take pictures of, then check out spuntoday.com/photography. What else? You can help support the podcast financially by shopping through my affiliate links. So if you go to spuntoday.com/affiliate links, you're gonna find a bunch of stuff there, a bunch of affiliate links. Now, what these are portals to other websites like iTunes, Amazon, etc. Where by going to spuntoday.com/affiliate links and just clicking on the Amazon banner, for example, it'll take you to Amazon. You'll do your shopping like normal. It will not cost you anything extra, but just for driving traffic towards Amazon's website, or to Amazon's website rather, they'll give me a kickback on whatever it is that you purchase. Now, it doesn't work if you already have stuff like in your cart. You would have to go through my link, my banner there for Amazon, and then search for whatever it is that you're gonna buy, add it to your cart, and then purchase it. And then I would get credit for that. And like I said, it doesn't cost you anything extra. It's just an extra time-wise, I guess, fucking 2 or 3 extra clicks. And you only have to do it once, actually. A good tactic and tip that I hear on other podcasts that I listen to is, go through the link one time, like go to spuntoday.com/affiliate links right now and click on the Amazon banner, and then just bookmark that page as Amazon or whatever. And then whenever you go to amazon.com, instead of typing it out, just click on the bookmark if you want, and it'll take you straight there, and it'll still work the same way. Anyway, check it out. I would appreciate it. And what else? You can also support on Patreon. I actually recently revamped the Patreon page and set it up with 4 levels of support. You can be a level 1 white belt, a level 2 blue belt supporter, a level 3 black belt supporter, or a level 4 Kuiper belt supporter. See what I did there? Check it out at Patreon, patreon.com/Spun Today. And based on the level of support that you pledge, which could be like $1 per episode, which I put out 2 episodes a month, so it'll be like $2 a month. You'll be a level 1 white belt, and you'll get something for that, a shout out on the podcast, and each other level you get something else. So if you want to know what those things are, feel free to check it out. If you're interested, at Patreon, patreon.com/Spun Today. Your support would be greatly appreciated. What else? I mentioned all the places where you can listen to the podcast. My book, right? This whole thing is about writing, right? Go to spuntoday.com/books. And currently it still says books because it's kind of like a psychological little mind fuck that I have going with myself that I'm currently losing, where I only have one book within the books link, and it annoys me, and I want to get my next book on there. So yeah, go to spuntoday.com/books, and you will see the cover of the book, Make Way for You, tips for getting out of your own way, along with a few descriptions of what the book is about. You have 4 audio excerpts, like audiobook style excerpts from the book, and a video of me with one of my favorite t-shirts on, Back to the Future, and just explaining like how the book, what the book is about, how it came to fruition, stuff like that. So check it out. You can purchase it wherever ebooks are sold, on your Kindle, Kobo, iBooks, wherever it is that you listen to ebooks, or if you want a paperback copy, if you're old school like that, just click on the cover of it right there on that page, spuntoday.com/books, and it'll shoot you over to the Amazon website where you can purchase a paperback as well. If you cannot afford the $2.99 that the book costs, $3.99 rather, that the book costs, then just drop me your email address. I will charge you 1 email address for 1 full copy of the book, and it will not cost you any dollars. And I will send you over a PDF copy of it if you're interested. Check it out. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, the short story, I don't know if you guys even remember, for anybody, if everybody that's listening now heard that episode, there was a free writing episode fucking eons ago, it feels like, where I shared with you guys the first draft to a story that I was working on, and I told you guys how I got the idea for the story and stuff like that. That's the story that I mentioned earlier in this episode that morphed into like a novella status, like level, and that I'm currently still working on. So once that's done, I'll do further, I'll connect the dots between those 2 episodes so you guys can see, I guess, the evolution of that story and how it fucking changed and morphed, and I'll get much deeper into it. But I'm a lot further along thanks to the podcast that I mentioned before and the editing tips of Sean Coyne. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. As always, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening.